Is how your photography looks something that's unique to you? Is your work style over substance, substance over style, or some combination of the two? It's a big question, so let's talk about it. What is a photographic style anyway? Can someone look at your photography and say your name? We all look at certain photographers and recognize who made them. There's no mistaking a Platone portrait or a Gregory Crutzen scene. You could easily make a quick list that includes Cindy Sherman, Yusuf Karsh, Diane Arbus, Steve McCurry. Even if you don't know their names, you likely know some of their work. These photographers all have both creative and technical vision. The one photographer everyone knows, even if they don't know the name of any other photographer, is Ansel Adams. His images and fame are inescapable. He's someone who not only had creative vision in knowing where to be and how to capture his scenes, but also in being meticulous in the darkroom to process those images. I recently visited the Vivian Maier exhibit at the Museum of Photography in New York. If you have the opportunity and are interested in art history or the incredible story of how her work came to be known, I highly recommend it. While walking through the gallery, I was struck not only by the content of the images themselves, but also by what modern skills and techniques can bring out of decades-old negatives by people who really know how to work with and process a photographic image. Even in wedding photography, there are some photographers whose images you just know who created them. A two-man photo or a Sam Hurd photo, despite the many people who try to emulate their styles, myself sometimes included, are distinctly theirs. There are many wedding photographers whose work is on another level and stunning to the point of unbelievability. I'm thinking of Susan Stripling and Jose Villa and the Chrismans. There are more, and while I recognize any list is highly subjective, to me these are the high watermarks and a level of skill to aspire to. This brings me back to my original theme of what a photographic style is. Books aplenty have been written on the topic, so if you're looking for a concise summary of the question, you're going to have to settle for the ramblings of a guy on YouTube. This is just one person's opinion, but for me, it's both content and technique. Since this channel is called Ask a Wedding Photographer, I'm going to focus on wedding photography here. When you're photographing people at an event, sometimes a record of who was there and what they were wearing might be something your client wants. Think table shots. We try to get them done as quickly as we can while keeping everyone in focus and having everyone's eyes open. And hopefully the table they're standing behind isn't too full of dirty dishes. The same could be said for the grip and grin photos during cocktail hour, where you send your second to interrupt people's conversation so they can get a picture of 2 or 4 or 6 people looking at the camera and smiling. These photos are never going to win any awards, and they're never going to make it into anyone's portfolio. But they are photos that please the client and, I feel, actually important to family history. There's very little art here, but these are photographs that still need to be lit properly and composed well. It's the moments in portraits, though, where one's style, to the degree any of us might have one, can come through. The moment when a bride brushes a tear from her father's cheek when they reach the end of an aisle lasts a split second. Being in position to capture that, using whatever lighting is available to you, and utilizing the compositional techniques that sell that moment is really difficult. How we as photographers approach these kinds of moments comes from experience and technique. While there are wedding photographers who are known for capturing moments, I feel there are probably more that are known for their portraits. Their skill comes from how they pose people, either by directing or prompting, how they light their subject and other objects within the frame, and how they compose the people within that frame. Sometimes that's showing a connection between the couple in a meaningful way, and sometimes it's placing them in an environment where there's a larger story to be told. For these photographers, with both moments and portraits, the content of the image leads the way. I'm no stranger to the tiny people in a landscape portrait, but personally I want to see people interacting with each other or interacting with their environment rather than something more stiff. There's certainly a place for the traditional portrait of nicely posed people looking into the camera and smiling. I do that at every wedding when we do the family formals. Once we're done with those, I love bringing the couple to some place less expected and creating something with them that I haven't seen before. I have varying degrees of success with this, but it is a goal nonetheless. When the wedding day has ended and you've culled it down to the keepers, you have some choices to make. How are you going to process these photographs? What techniques are you going to use to bring out the content of your images? Are you going to make them true to life and true to color? Are you someone who has a bright and airy style, a dark and moody style, or something all your own? All of this dovetails into a story that's been making the rounds this past week where a bride made a TikTok about how she was upset with how her wedding photos looked. There's an article about it on Petapixel, and it's easy enough to find people talking about it on YouTube, so I'll let you go down that rabbit hole on your own. From the examples I saw, the content of the photos was pretty decent. There were nice portraits and decent moments with adequate lighting and composition. The issue, according to this bride, was the approach the photographer used to give the photographs their look in post-production. It's my understanding that's the photographer's look, so if the bride knew that in advance based upon her portfolio, I'm not sure what else she was expecting, but I'll leave that particular analysis to others. My point here, and what I've been trying to build to, is that these were perfectly fine photographs that have a style applied to them. The same raw file can be processed in any number of ways, whether it's the exposure or the white balance or how highlight and shadow detail are rendered. These and other characteristics are open to subjective interpretation. How you process a raw file to make the resulting photograph is indeed part of your technique. Presets are shortcuts to that result, and there's nothing innately wrong with using them, but that in itself doesn't render a personal style. After the content of an image, how we process it is what makes the photograph the photograph. This is what Ansel Adams did, this is what Two Man does, and it's what all the photographers I mentioned earlier utilize in service of their artistic vision. I'd like to think it's what we all do, but I also think the dress should look like the dress and the flowers should look like the flowers. There's nothing inherently wrong with being a light and airy style photographer, or a dark and moody style photographer, or someone who selectively colors their images. I have my personal feelings about these looks, but if your portfolio is consistent and people know what they're getting when they hire you, you do you, and hopefully you'll find your audience. I've seen these trends come and go in my day. Earlier in my wedding career, putting textures on top of portraits was all the rage. This might be a hot take, but I always thought that looked really bad. I've seen very few examples of that done where it made sense within the context of a specific photograph, but it was overwhelmingly done poorly, and the photos were just a mess. Now that that trend is well in our collective rearview mirror, I don't feel like I'm going to upset any current photographer's apple cart by saying so, but the lessons of that trend endure. Trends come and go. Some of us are in this business with the intent of doing it for only a few years, and some of us are lucky enough to have it be our career. If you're following the trend of the day with how your images look on the surface, you're going to find a lot of people at the top of the curve who like that look. Again, this is just one photographer's opinion, but I don't want my couples to look at their photos and say, that looks so 2024. Aside from changes in fashions and hairstyles, I want the look of my photos to be timeless. I want people to view the photos I made for them as representative of not only what they and their wedding look like, but also what it felt like. True to color and true to life is timeless. What's on the surface shouldn't be more important than what's beneath that surface. Which circles back to my larger point, which is that a pre-made preset is not a personal style. If you can buy it, you're not the only one that has done so, and your work is going to look on the surface like everyone else who bought that preset. I'm not going to pretend I've never done this myself. Back in the day, I used to collect presets like they were infinity stones. When I was less experienced, I used these tools as a crutch when I was lacking the skills to properly light or compose something. At the time, I was grateful for that crutch, and in the short term, it kind of worked. But man, those photos look dated. On the other hand, there are times these presets can be a shortcut to creating a customized look. They're all editable and customizable. You can pick a color tone from this set and a tone curve from that set and mix and match them into something that's unique to you. If you think it looks good and your clients think it looks good, then that's all that matters. To that point, if you make your own presets, that's something entirely different. If you've moved the sliders around in Lightroom or Capture One and saved them for later, that's not what I'm talking about here. If you've customized pre-existing presets that you downloaded or bought, that's also something different. Something you've tailored to your aesthetic is not the same as something off the shelf where you just install it and click go. So are you showing a consistent set of work that's something you're able to produce for a couple who hires you based on that work? Is how you're capturing moments or creating portraits based on intuition and experience? And finally, is how you're processing your photography something the couple is going to recognize themselves in 10 years down the road? 20 years? If you're showing a collection of airy or moody tone photographs in your portfolio, or using a preset you downloaded to give your photos a particular look, I feel you should do so if it's in service to your client and the images they'll be receiving. It shouldn't be to please other photographers or follow what's popular at the moment so your work trends on your social media app of choice. This might explain why I don't trend on social media, but that's not my goal. I want my images to be timeless. I want the people that receive them to recognize themselves in them with authenticity and honesty. Muddying the waters with a ubiquitous look doesn't do anyone, including yourself, any favors. If a pre-made preset is your style, you're just one of any number of people who also have that preset. How you process and present your photos makes a difference, but less so than moments in composition and lighting. These are the qualities that create photographs worthy of continued viewing. An exceptionally small percentage of us will create work that lives on past ourselves. But the degree to which I'm not going to have photographs hanging on any gallery walls, I'm content in the knowledge that they will hang on the walls of the people who see themselves in those photographs that I've been fortunate to create for them. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your taking the time to listen. If you like what you heard, feel free to leave a like. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. What are your thoughts on all of this? Where do you land when it comes to industry trends on how we present our work? Feel free to sound off in the comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this and hear more stories, check out this other one I made for you. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth Kaye, and I'm here to help.